The ability to refuel without having to land allows fighter pilots to stick to their flight plans and keep crunching the ever-so-sweet miles under their wings, getting them closer to the target that they'll inevitably erase from existence, with a bit of luck. To do this, though, you need a literal flying gas pump, and, well, ladies and gentlemen, meet the KC-46 Pegasus, a monster of an airplane designed to take off with a dozen Olympic swimming pools worth of fuel. This air tanker is capable of flying around the entire planet and refueling dozens of fighters at a time, leading the line in the US Air Force's mid-air fuel logistics. The Pegasus's path to existence, however, was everything but clear skies and calm winds. This tanker is a child of bureaucratic hell, scandals, corruption, and controversies. In fact, the program that gave birth to the Pegasus was started because a few government officials couldn't keep their hands clean. The KCX program. Now, in the early 2000s, Boeing's KC-135 Stratotankers were well known as the Air Force's old and reliable aerial tankers. They'd actually been using them since the late 1950s, and the tankers proved invaluable in the Southeast Asia theater. You can actually check out our in-depth video on the Stratotanker if you want to learn every niche detail about it. After this video, of course. But in essence, it allowed F-105s, F-4s, and B-52 bombers to reach targets that would be far too distant without aerial refueling. 4 decades later, though, the Stratotankers were proving obsolete. Between 1993 and 2003, the number of maintenance hours on these massive birds doubled while the overhaul costs tripled. Aside from already having to pay for the fuel and the crew, the American taxpayers had to cash out about $10,000 for maintenance for every single hour of a Stratotanker's flight time. Father Time started doing his thing, and the bird was starting to lose its status as the old and reliable tanker. The costs would only grow with time, and it became clear that the Air Force needed new flying tankers. The first idea was to buy 80 and lease 20 Boeing KC-767 tankers, but this deal fell through. Why? Well, because of corruption, of course. A government official by the name of Darlene Druyan boosted the price for Boeing while working for the Department of the Air Force. It was later found that she was, at the time, preparing to leave the department and join Boeing. The controversy, dubbed the biggest Pentagon scandal in 20 years by the media, was so monumental it resulted in the termination of Boeing's CFO, Michael Sears, and the resignation of their CEO, Philip Condit, with Boeing having to pay $615 million in fines, not to mention that almost everyone involved went to prison. So, quite a big deal. I watched The Big Short this week. It's like, wow, those guys, they just got away with all of it. After the buying existing tankers fiasco, the Air Force decided to go back to the drawing board and get an entirely new fleet of tankers. A fresh start for a fresh fleet. In January of 2007, the USAF started the KCX Aero Refueling Aircraft Program. The $40 billion contract, which translates to about $62 billion today, called for 179 tankers, 4 for the system development and demonstrations, and 175 for production. The only 2 companies gunning the contract down were Boeing, with a design based on the 767, and Airbus, who had partnered up with Northrop Grumman with a design based on the A330. About a year later, the Department of Defense opted for the latter option, dubbed the KC-45A. Boeing protested, submitting a note with the Government Accountability Office, and the GAO upheld the claim, recommending the rebidding of the contract. Just a few months later, the Air Force reopened the bidding with clearer criteria. And, wouldn't you know it, Boeing, in spite of their super tarnished name, the prison, the $600 million plus in fines, won the rebidding, and the official decision was made public in early 2011. Despite being massively behind schedule, the first prototype of the new generation of tankers was designated KC-46A, and it would take its maiden test voyage in late 2014. Pegasus design. The Pegasus is essentially a Frankenstein's monster type of airplane, incorporating elements from various Boeing 767 variants. They used the fuselage of the 200ER variant, with the wings, landing gear, cargo door, and floor of the 300F variant. The flaps were copied from the 400ER variant, with a Dreamliner-like glass cockpit. Overall, the Pegasus measures 159 feet or 48.5 meters in length, with a wingspan of 156 feet or 47.5 meters. What's really relevant for an aerial tanker, though, is its cargo and fuel capacity. With a maximum takeoff weight of 415,000 pounds or almost 190 tons, it easily blows its predecessor, the Stratotanker, out of the water, or air, we suppose, as the granddaddy of air tankers tops out at 322,500 pounds or 146 tons. The key of its transport capabilities doesn't lie in the weight, but in the layout of its cargo area. This area is incredibly important since tankers aren't only expected to refuel other airplanes mid-flight, they're also expected to transport cargo and passengers. The Pegasus has 3 configurations for this purpose. In its cargo configuration, it can fit 3 times more pallets than the Stratotanker with 18 pallets of cargo. This is the same pallet capacity as the C-17 Globemaster, a plane designed for the sole purpose of transport. The KC-46 can also fit 30% more people than the Stratotanker with 114 in its passenger configuration and 2 times more patients than a Stratotanker in case of an aeromedical evacuation with 54 patients. 24 of those patients can fit with their rescue baskets, known as the litters, while the 5-strong medical team is seated in the front of the Pegasus with the flight crew. The crew can switch between configurations in no more than 2 hours, a job that usually takes other cargo planes about 5 hours. Interestingly, the Stratotanker can still take on more pure weight. It's just that the configuration is less optimal, to put it mildly. The Pegasus can take off with a maximum cargo capacity of 65,000 pounds or 30 metric tons, or 5 fully grown African bush elephants for a clearer measurement, you're welcome. The Stratotanker, in comparison, could fit 83,000 pounds of cargo, which is about 37.5 tons, or about 6 entire elephants and maybe the trunk and the head of another, which would be kind of gross. The most important element to an aerial tanker is, of course, the fuel capacity. The Pegasus can carry approximately 10% more fuel than the Stratotanker, with more than 212,000 pounds or 96 tons of fuel on board. Its predecessor could carry no more than 200,000 pounds or 90 tons of fuel. The Pegasus can therefore refuel 30 F-16 Fighting Falcons, while the Stratotanker could refuel 28. And at this point, you might be thinking, Simon, weren't you talking about how much bigger it was? And now you're just saying that there's this little difference, 28 versus 30. And I mean, yeah, you're kind of right. But then you have to consider a final factor that ensures the KC-46's supremacy, and that's its range. The Pegasus has an incredible range of more than 7,300 miles. That's close to 12,000 kilometers. That's almost 5 times greater than the Stratotankers. That means that the Pegasus could make the New York to Los Angeles trip 3 times, while the Stratotanker would run out of fuel and crash somewhere around New Mexico during the first trip. Additionally, the Stratotanker itself can be refueled mid-air, essentially turning its range global. It's pretty cool, a tanker refilling a tanker. To push the flying tanker onward, Pegasus relies on 2 Pratt & Whitney PW4062 engines, each one creating 62,000 pounds of force. This is another field in which the Stratotanker just cannot compete, as its 4 CFM F108 engines produce 86,400 pounds of force combined. When level, the Pegasus cruises at a speed of around 530 miles an hour or 850 kilometers per hour, while it can shift a gear. And if you're pushing it, it can go to 570 miles or 910 kilometers an hour if necessary. Returning to our New York to Los Angeles example, the Pegasus makes that trip in less than 5 hours. Despite the many different things the Pegasus can do, it still requires no more than 3 crew members to operate. 2 of them, they're of course the pilots, and the 3rd crew member is the refueling boom operator. The boom is, for lack of a better word, that long tube that extends from the Pegasus into another plane and then pumps fuel into it. Many people find it incredible that the legendary B-2 stealth bomber has a bed in it because of how long missions can be, and the Pegasus is not any different. It actually comes with 3 bunks, a kitchen, and a lavatory. At maximum capacity, the Pegasus can accommodate 15 crew members, and it's FAA certified to transport 58 passengers, even though it can, if necessary, onboard 113 people. However, it's likely the Pegasus would only onboard that many people in the case of an emergency evacuation. To keep all of those people safe, the Pegasus is equipped with top-of-the-line countermeasures to detect and avoid threats. This includes an infrared missile system with flares, a hardened hull to protect the plane from nuclear, chemical, and biological threats, as well as additional armor for the flight deck. The massive bird is fitted with the Advanced Battle Management System, which connects it to other units on the water, ground, and in the air, allowing Pegasus to conduct reconnaissance tasks and relay that information to other units. This is, once again, why the range of the Pegasus is so important. Staying in the air for longer during a recon mission can mean the difference between life and death in the field. Aside from recon capabilities, the KC-46 also has some electronic warfare capabilities, but the specifics, well, they're a military secret, so we'll just end this section here. A part of the design that the Air Force is particularly careful about, especially nowadays, is the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, known as MCAS. The MCAS is a flight stabilizing feature designed to avoid stalling, and it was introduced on the Pegasus because of the imbalances caused by fuel redistribution after refueling another plane. As the Pegasus loses fuel, it starts shifting around the containers, and this means that the pilots constantly have to deal with weight redistribution mid-air, which is a huge no-no in aviation as it can cause disbalance and crash a plane. The purpose of the system is to automatically reposition the plane in such a way that the redistribution of weight doesn't destabilize it. However, you might have heard of MCAS for a specific reason, and that's because in 2018 and 2019, this very same system was found guilty of causing 2 plane crashes. 2 Boeing 737s operated by Lion Air and Ethiopian Airlines respectively crashed, tragically killing everyone on board in both instances. It was later found out that the MCAS, and I hope we don't get assassinated for saying this because it is Boeing's system we're talking about here, was at fault for the planes nosing down for no reason. Allegedly, Boeing, allegedly. It's a big coincidence. It must be, right? Please. The deaths of the whistleblowers. The system was introduced into the design of the Pegasus long before those accidents took place, though, and unlike those models, the KC-46 system automatically disengages if the pilot moves the stick. It doesn't take control away from the pilot. The Air Force, nevertheless, began reviewing training procedures in 2019 following those accidents. How the flying horse operates. The Pegasus is nowadays in service all over the world. The United States Air Force would receive their first Pegasus in 2019, which was well past the 2016 due date, and as if being late wasn't bad enough, the Pegasus would bog down with a plethora of problems. The first issue the Air Force spotted was the inadequate boom pressure during the refueling of the A-10 Warthog. The boom in the Pegasus uses 1,400 pounds of thrust resistance, which is an international standard, while the A-10 can only generate 650 pounds. This was actually the fault of the Air Force, which they admitted as they didn't provide Boeing with the specifications of the refueling requirements for the A-10. Another issue was the distortion of the remote vision system, which happened because of glare in certain conditions. The problem of cargo locks would quickly present itself too. In September of 2019, the Air Force restricted the plane from transporting cargo and passengers because the cargo locks kept unlocking mid-flight. Certainly not something you want happening when there are passengers on board. It would take another 2 years for all these problems to be fixed on the existing KC-46s, and operational use was only allowed in 2021. Even then, however, it was still limited. The Pegasus could only spread its wings in the United States, deemed unfit for deployment in combat areas, as it could only refuel 4 aircraft: B-52s, F-15s and 16s, and the FA-18. In 2022, 6 years after the original delivery date of the first aircraft and 3 years after the actual delivery, the Air Force greenlit the Pegasus for general operational use. In retrospect, it seemed like Boeing delivered a half-baked product that required years of work to get it up in the air safely. In 2024, however, one Pegasus completed a 45-hour-long flight around the entire planet as part of Project Magellan. During its flight, it refueled several aircraft, and it itself was refueled a few times, proving its operational capacity. When refueling, the Pegasus can use both a refueling boom and drogue pods. A refueling boom is a rigid tube protruding from the back of an air tanker. A drogue? That's a completely different story. You see, the drogue is a sort of basket at the end of a long, flexible hose that comes out of a pod. The Pegasus has a drogue pod on each wing. Once the hose with the drogue is released, the drogue itself acts as a funnel for the aircraft receiving the fuel. The pilot of the fueling aircraft aims to essentially stab the drogue with the aircraft's probe. Once the probe and the drogue make contact, the drogue leads the probe to a valve, and when the valve locks, the refueling can start. Some planes, like the Pegasus, use both the stiff boom system and the drogue system, and it can, in theory, refuel up to 3 aircraft at once, as they don't get in each other's way. This is a huge advantage in comparison to other tanker aircraft, as it's saving the refueling aircraft a whole lot of time, which can make the difference between success and failure during missions. To guide the refueling process, a crew member uses one of the 2 onboard aerial refueling operator stations. These stations use the remote vision system, which is equipped with cameras allowing the operator to aim the boom. To allow operators refueling in the dark, the system comes equipped with stereoscopic glasses. Despite the high technological capacity of the system, it too has some issues. As mentioned earlier, glare issues, depth depiction issues, and curvature distortions can occur with the remote vision system, which obviously makes it more difficult for the operator to aim the boom. This, however, will most likely be solved with the release of an update for the system. Now, at this point in time, Boeing produced 98 Pegasus, with the Air Force alone planning to obtain 188 of them, while that number might even go up to 288 if the Air Force decides to exercise all of their options provided by the new tanker program. The United States, however, not the only operator of this aircraft. Japan made an order of 6 aircraft, with some of them already introduced. Israel already purchased 4, with a contract allowing another 4 if Israel deems it necessary. And as of 2025, Turkey is also seriously considering renewing its tanker fleet with the Pegasus. A work in progress. So the Pegasus seems to be its own bad luck charm. When taking a retrospective look at the project, it seems everything around it went wrong at every step of the way. First of all, the program that requested a new design, and ultimately landed with the Pegasus, was pushed forward only because a corruption scandal prevented the United States from buying and leasing already existing aircraft. Then, the original proposal for the Pegasus was rejected, and it took years for the design to win the second round of proposals. The development of the Pegasus was painfully slow, and it was delivered a few years after the due date, and even after delivery, it was pretty much unfinished. It was a work in progress that the Air Force keeps upgrading to this day, which I'm sure they love. Even today, its service record is not perfectly clean. Just recently, in July of 2025, the boom of one Pegasus was severely damaged during routine refueling of an F-22 east of Norfolk, with the pilots landing the damaged bird safely. On top of all of that, the Air Force won't be completing its 188-strong fleet of KC-46 tankers anytime soon. Now, with all of that in mind, it's right to ask, is there something going right with this aircraft? And truth be told, yeah, it did do one thing right. The Pegasus rejuvenated the Air Force's tanker fleet. Although the fleet is not complete, it is much younger and more durable than the aging Strato tankers, which spent more time in the workshop than they did in the air, at least towards the end of their service life. Even though the Pegasus went through a very long period of both on-ground and aerial turbulence, the biggest problems are now ironed out, and there's no reason not to expect a strong performance from this aerial tanker in the future. Thank you for watching.